Pretty often on this channel, we talk about remake mods for Fallout 4 and Skyrim. These being immensely ambitious mod projects where modders are trying to recreate some of the older games in their franchises. As of late, we saw pretty awesome gameplay trailers and presentations from both Skyblivion, the mod attempting to recreate Oblivion in Skyrim, and Skywind, the sister mod trying to recreate Morrowind in Skyrim. Yet, one mod that I have never covered on this channel, and frankly didn't even know about, is Daggerfall, which actually isn't attempting to do anything. It already has recreated the main quest of Daggerfall, the second Elder Scrolls game in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. This mod is presently available for both Skyrim and Skyrim Special Edition, and just by clicking on the link down below in the description, you can get it for yourself. And just right off the bat, this is actually a really awesome and well done mod. It wouldn't surprise me to suggest that most people in the Elder Scrolls community, especially the modding community nowadays, have just never experienced this one, or at least all the way back in 1996, and even though Bethesda games were never known for their graphics, this one in particular by modern standards doesn't hold up the best, and in effect what Skygerfall is going to do is give you an opportunity to experience this once again. So naturally for me, and I imagine for a lot of you, this mod ran totally under the radar, which is kind of refreshing. There was no anticipating phase, it's just here and we can play it. It's not actually all of Daggerfall. This right now is only focusing on the main quest of the game, but otherwise it is a fairly comprehensive experience. It'll take you to a totally new land that is created and structured very much so in a theme similar to that of which we saw with Daggerfall originally, and from there you can progress through this main quest and meet several of these characters that for some of you will act as familiar faces. And also one of the best parts of it, it actually is totally voiced.
For a mercenary to find out what has become of Nilfgaard, the king's grandmother. It could be a good way to ingratiate yourself with the royal family there.
Excuse the gloom, but none may know of this meeting. The nature of my trouble is darker still. Over a year ago, King Lysandus of Daggerfall died honorably.
So right off the bat, one of my favorite aspects of this mod, and one thing that really just makes it stand out, is it really feels like it is meant to be a one-to-one recreation of Daggerfall. The dungeons in this feel very 90s and early 2000s. You'll walk through these corridors that are just boxes with repeated textures, go into a large room with just a few little loot piles placed down in the middle of it, but also one of the most notable things you'll find with this mod and clearing through some of these dungeons is it's really hard. Many games from the 90s to 2000s were known for their difficulty levels, and it makes a return with this one. You'll die pretty quick if you try and just run in guns blazing like you could in Skyrim, or I guess swords blazing, but at the same time, even after repeated deaths, I couldn't help but love this experience, and it just put a really big smile on my face. This is one of those things that's actually quite different. It's not like what we have right now, it's not in a similar vein to a lot of those other quest mods. I never played Daggerfall, so I don't really have the nostalgia factor going for me, but I imagine some of you definitely will. After leaving some of the dungeons, you will find a fairly barren map. There's a couple of towns and castles placed throughout it. The main quest will take you through many of these, although fortunately, even though the map itself is fairly desolate, there is a system where you can quickly fast travel from town to town when you get a quest objective somewhere else, and it's actually a really large map. If you were to attempt to explore all of this on foot, it would take a decent amount of time in a very similar vein to the original Daggerfall. Obviously, it's not quite the whole map. If you weren't familiar, the original Daggerfall actually featured 15,000 towns, cities, villages, etc., mostly because a good chunk of that was randomly generated. But honestly, as I was playing this, I found myself getting drawn in more so than with a lot of other quest mods. If you're someone like me who's never actually played Daggerfall, this is a half decent way to actually get exposed to the main story itself, as you kind of are playing the whole main story. There won't be things like dialogue options or different choices like you see with the more modern Elder Scrolls games, but it's still a good story. It still is interesting. You want to find out what's going to happen next, and especially with these dungeons, which you'll find yourself in a lot of the time, it kind of draws you in just because of how novel it is. The dungeon style really takes you back to those simpler times where they were ridiculously confusing but not super detailed, just having occasional enemies or loot placed throughout with otherwise barren walls. This mod also does go the extra step to add in some of the other unique things that didn't carry over from Daggerfall. Some of the spells from that game are are added back into Skyrim, and these are to keep. It's not like it's just for this quest mod. You can use them all throughout Skyrim, even the main game, and other things like actually being able to bash open certain locks if, let's say, you don't have a lockpick. It won't work all the time, but it is functionality added back with this. All the various creatures from Daggerfall were recreated from this, so you'll be seeing a lot of new or maybe familiar faces. Also, a pretty interesting mechanic: if the weapon you're using is of too low grade of a material, for some creatures it just won't do any damage. You'll have to use something a bit better or just run away. But also, to go along with this, some new armor and weapons were also added in to flesh out the level list of enemies and also for you to use against enemies. And there's a few other things you could find as you actually play this. Although I bet one of the big questions a lot of people will have is, how does this fit in with the rest of Skyrim? How do you get to this place? Can you play the main story of Skyrim also with this mod? And yeah, you actually can. So the way this mod is structured is, right off the bat, you're going to use an alternate start mod. This will place you down in the right place within Daggerfall, and you'll start the main story that way. And you'll have one initial choice as to your character's class, which will carry over to Skyrim. And in effect, after you actually finish the main story of Daggerfall, you'll have the option to travel to Skyrim and just start off as if you were a new character. So if you wanted to, after beating the main quest of Daggerfall, you could beat the main quest of Skyrim. And of course, carrying over some of that new content you found along the way. So all in all, this is actually a really cool one. On paper, it might not even sound all that awesome. Like, if someone described this to me, I'm not sure I would be interested in it, but after playing it for a few hours, I want to play more. It's genuinely enthralling. It'll suck you in pretty quickly, and I imagine this will be even more so for those of you that played Daggerfall back in the day, or even just growing up, and now getting to experience it in Skyrim. Although the world space is the world space, you still can use things like graphics mods or ENBs to make things just look a lot better, and all around, this is definitely a great way to spend a few hours this weekend, or even the entire weekend, and honestly, an incredible job by this mod author. So often we hear about things like this being discussed or in a conceptual stage still, but now we actually have something released, and it's pretty amazing to get to experience that. He does mention how future updates are planned, as well as he is recruiting, so I'll have links to all of that down below if you want to check it out. But otherwise, hopefully you found this one informative, hopefully you enjoyed it, but with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.